Hi, welcome back to the channel. This is The Casuals. I'm Saki.
And I'm Jin.
And today's episode, we are going back to Meal for Two. For this Meal for Two, we are going to talk about ramen, specifically a chain called Hironori. So this place, we've been together, I believe, at least once. I've been back a couple times, so I've had the other types of ramen. Is that correct? You've been there you've only had that once?
Yep, the only time I've been there was the time I went with you.
All right. So yeah, so Jin's only been there once. I've been there about maybe 3 times total now. And so for today, we will talk about, our criteria, our 5-star system with the location, price, time, flavor, quality, and a service if you want to add that in for fun. So for Hiro Nori, it is I believe, a starting of a small chain because I know there's a couple different locations. I know, well, I've only been to the same one a couple times, and Jin has gone with me to that one. So for location wise, how about we start off with that? For me, location, I would say it's kind of oddly placed. It's
Yeah, I would agree. It's not in a bad place necessarily, but it's not in like a good place. It's just in an unexpected place. So the place the one we went to where it was located, it's kind of near the freeway, a ways off, and it's in the industrial area where there's like a lot of large corporations situated. And so there's no real, I would say, residential area nearby. And because of that, a lot of shops tend to be more around this area. A lot of buildings, rather, are like just made for, are occupied for, I would say, non commercial stuff, non like consumer stuff. So the ramen shop happens to be placed in a lot where there's a lot of what was it was called, like those car repair places.
Yeah, auto repair shops.
Auto repair shops, yes, yes, yes.
So yeah, as Jin said, it is located in a parking lot that shares, like, I want to say like 5 auto repair shop places, all in the same like plaza parking lot. I could say, which makes it very difficult to find parking, especially if you go during the week, during lunch hours. It's a little bit hectic. You might have to park across the street or down the block or something just to get there. So the location of it's okay. It's not the greatest, it's not the worst, but I think if they relocated to more of a, more accessible plaza, I think that would be a little bit better in their favor. Because it also is like the only restaurant nearby, randomly in there. Because as Jin said, it is within all like the industrial shipping, buildings and all that. So are all those big semi trucks nearby. So it is a little bit difficult to see unless you know where it is. Or if you have GPS, then you're good to go.
Definitely.
All right, so let's get into the ramen itself. So the price for the ramens I believe, was the tonkatsu ramen, and
You
I think
did.
you had the shoyu, right?
Yes, I did have. No, I believe it's the Shio ramen. It might have been the Shoyu,
I
though.
think it's the shoyu because I remember they only have about 3 to 4 different types of ramen.
Yes, it was the tonkatsu miso and shoyu, right? If I'm correct?
Yeah, I believe you had shoyu. I had the tonkatsu. So tonkatsu is, pork bone broth with, the noodles and all the fixins. And the shoyu is basically a soy sauce broth.
Yeah.
So with that, the pricing for at least this franchise, the it's about minimum $15 per ramen. So it's a little pricey for my taste. I'm used to, $10 to $12, not 15. The tonkatsu was actually over $16, so it was a little
Yes.
pricey for me. How about you? Did you think the pricing was fair?
I feel like the pricing was definitely, at first impression, first of all, is the pricing was definitely a lot higher than I would have expected. And that's just because other previous ramen shops did not charge as much. And so um going into the ramen shop and seeing this price of $16 for a tonkatsu ramen threw me off a lot. Um so I would say for first impression, definitely it's on the pricier side where it kind of um makes me hesitant to buy it.
Yeah, I agree. Even though I have been back a couple times, I mean, it's at least consistent from what I can say, so that's really good. But I do think the pricing's a little bit much. I know it's not like this huge like franchise, like McDonald's is huge, so they can charge whatever they want cheaper. But this place is a bit of a smaller franchise, so I understand the reasoning why their prices are so high. But for my taste specifically, I prefer maybe something a little cheaper.
I think I would
And
be
then,
fine if it was in the $13 range.
yeah, I'd say 12, $13, like $12 for the shoyu and maybe 13 for like the tonkatsu would be more fair, I would say. And then also, we didn't just eat the ramen. We also did get a couple sides to taste test. Uh, I'll go over these now actually. So, one of the sides were pork buns. Do you remember those pork buns?
Yes, I do.
So we got the pork buns. I think it was a two-piece, right?
Yes, 2 pork buns.
We got the two pork buns. And they're, it's an appetizer, so they're not supposed to be big. But again, pricing, they were almost at least $8 for two.
I think so. It was either $6 or $8. It was one of the two for those.
Yeah, so basically the pork buns were kind of like the size of an one of those sandwiches, Uncrustables, I believe.
Combustible.
They were about the size of an Uncrustable, which is like, those frozen peanut butter jelly sandwiches for kids, that they just
Yeah,
throw throughout the day.
definitely. It
So
was
yeah,
around that size.
I would say it's around that size. So the size was good. Again, pricing I would say a little bit lower for what you get. And then also we did get the it's a little controversial for me and Jen, but we got their karaage chicken, which is basically fried chicken, Japanese style fried chicken. And from what we had, sorry, pricing, of course, this was about $9. And from what we had, it was not karaage chicken, like traditional karaage chicken.
Yes. We'll get to the flavor later on, but the whole point for this part is the pricing. And so overall, what would you say about the pricing for the pork buns?
Pork buns, I would say maybe drop that to maybe $5.50.
$5.50.
As Yeah, I would say eight's a little bit much for what you get. It's almost like half of a ramen for two little pork buns.
Indeed. I'm kind of in the same. I'm in the same agreement with Saki over here because they were small. Incredibly smaller than I thought they would be. I was thrown off by that. You can eat the whole thing in one bite if you had a bigger mouth. 2 bites if for most people. And we'll talk about why the pork buns and ramen and everything else might be priced higher. That'll come up later, and I believe flavor. We'll cover that. But overall, for the karaage, the pork buns, and ramen, we honestly think both of us are, I believe, in the same agreement that it's a little bit priced higher than we would think it's worth.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, Jin. Just because, we've had, cheaper ramen that have the same, quality and ingredients and stuff. So yeah, for me at least, I prefer maybe a little bit lower. Again, the karaage is about $9 for the portion you get. I do understand it's chicken, so more pricey, but maybe $7 for how much you get would have been a little more fair.
Basically, it seems like for most of their menu items, about $2 less for almost every single one of them would be pretty reasonable in our opinion.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on there. So, all right, let's stop talking about some pricing. Let's get on to a little more fun stuff. Let's talk about should we start with flavor, or do you want to go through the time process first, really quick?
Time process will be really quick. It wasn't that long. I believe it was 20 minutes, 10 to 20 minutes for all of the items to come.
Yeah, about 10 to 20 minutes. Karaage, of course, they have to it's fried chicken, so they deep fry it, so that does take a little longer. And, since it is technically a side, not an appetizer, I do apologize that I did call the pork buns an appetizer. It's actually noted under sides on their menu. But yeah, like about 10 to 20 minutes was a pretty good amount of time since we did order 2 ramens and 2 sides. So I thought the timing was very reasonable.
It was appropriate, and yeah, I think there was. Oh, to note that when we did order, there was less people during that time. So that the order time may change depending on how many people are in the restaurant currently, or at the time that you're ordering. But for us, there wasn't that many people, so that's maybe part of the reason why we got our ramen so fast.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do remember that. There were only maybe 2 or 3 other tables in there that were before us. So yeah, I do agree. Timing of if it is packed, you'll get your food either sooner or later.
All right, and with that, we can move on to the next segment, which would be flavor. What was your impressions for each of the items that we had?
All right, so yeah, flavor-wise, I think the tonkatsu ramen, I thought the flavor was pretty good. For me, it could have been a little bit stronger of a flavor. Like, I like garlic in my ramen, and they put it on the side. And I know it's like, oh, not everyone, wants garlic breath or whatever, but for me, I would have I put all that garlic in there because I love that garlic flavor in my ramen personally. So I'm kind of glad they put it on the side for you, or they asked if you wanted it on the side. So I do appreciate that. For the pork buns, I think the flavor was actually pretty good. Maybe I think it was the pork itself could have been a little bit marinated a little bit longer for my taste.
Mm.
But other than that, I thought those were pretty solid. And then their karaage, which we will get to that in this. The karaage, I believe the pieces were pretty big, good size. So, and then the flavoring of it was pretty good. I did like the sauce that it did come with, but I know I'm just gonna get this out of the way right now, Jen. It's bothering me. It wasn't karaage. It was fried. It was fried chicken.
Yeah, so um if we're talking about flavor alone, flavor was actually pretty decent for the karaage, surprisingly, due to the sauce, I would say. But it was not karaage. It was basically, as Saki said, it was fried chicken, and yeah. So it was kind of it's kind of weird that in the sense it's okay in terms of flavoring, but it's just not karaage. It's just fried chicken.
Yeah,
And
so with the
go ahead.
karaage, oh yeah, I just wanted to throw this out there for you if you can answer this for our future selves. But what to you is the distinction between karaage and fried chicken from here?
I would say definitely the seasoning of the chicken itself. Um, the reason is that the quote unquote karaage that we had at that ramen place, the chicken was extremely bland if you ate it without the sauce. It was like no flavor whatsoever. It was just a piece of meat. And with karaage, usually from my experiences, is that um, karaage tends to have a slightly um, different flavor that depends on where you get it, and the karaage itself, I think texture wise is also different. So the ones we had were from my memory, they were pretty crunchy, weren't they?
Yeah, they did have a nice crunch to it.
But
I
from
remember.
my memory, karaage is not supposed to be extremely crunchy. It's kind of a mix of both like soft and crunchy.
Yeah, I think they just I don't know if it was just because the cooks that day. I don't know if they have consistent cooks, but yeah, one maybe they just overcooked it a little bit, so it was extra crunchy for us. But you never know.
So yeah, moving along from that, um, my impressions of the ramen. So I had the shoyu ramen, and shoyu ramen was pretty okay. There was nothing spectacular about it, in my opinion. And there was one issue that I had with the shoyu ramen is that as you eat more, it gets really salty. And I mean, like, you start feeling the salt later on. And obviously, you may go, well, duh, you got the shoyu ramen, which has, soy base, which tends to be saltier. But here's my issue with that. Shoyu ramen is, technically quote unquote saltier, but the problem is if it gets too salty, then that's an issue that should not happen in terms of making, a shoyu ramen, in my opinion. You should never feel like this ramen is super salty by the end of, like, nearing the end of the meal. That's maybe a result of me being, who knows, maybe I'm more sensitive to salt overall. That day just happened, the cook may have happened to just make it more salty than usual. I've only been there once, so this is my only impression of it, but yeah, the shoyu was definitely saltier than I would have liked near the end, and it became really hard to eat. I couldn't even eat the side vegetables that were inside the broth because they soaked up all that salt later on, so that was an issue. Sorry, I had to get a sip of water. The pork buns, in my opinion, it's an interesting case because we mentioned that the pork buns were around $8, $6 to $8, and
Yeah, $8.
and they were definitely decent. But the issue with that pork bun is that it just felt like there wasn't that much flavor. However, I did mention this while we were talking about price, how we would get to the reason why these may be more pricier than your typical other ramen chains is that when we ate them, in my impression was this was definitely handmade.
Yes, I do agree with that.
You can definitely tell it was handmade just because, well, one, the lack of seasoning. Which is ironic in that sense, is because of the lack of seasoning, you can tell it's handmade, and the pork bun definitely had that issue. Same thing as I mentioned with the karaage, where the chicken itself was no seasoning whatsoever, and the only reason why the karaage itself was decent was that, the sauce itself was amazing. Sauce itself was the one that really carried the karaage, and going along with the whole, pricing thing, I do want to point out with the tonkatsu ramen that you had, Saki. You allowed me to have a taste of your tonkatsu ramen, and my first impression was this is definitely made in-house, 100%. I don't know if that gave you that impression. Did it give you that impression?
It did, because on their menu, it does say their broths, are boiled and stuff and are prepared like for at least 24 hours. And I could tell it was made in-house because it did not taste like it was there for 24 hours.
So here's the thing with that tonkatsu ramen. Some people may like this, some people may not. But when I tasted your tonkatsu ramen, again, we may not know if this was a consistency issue, or if this was a one-time thing. Who knows? Maybe cook just made a bad batch that day. But when I had it, the pork broth tasted burnt. And you're like, well, how does that make sense? Well, have you ever had like a chicken wing and chicken drumstick specifically, or maybe even a wing itself, like the wing part, and you eat that bottom end of the bone, and you know how that bone is kind of burnt in that sense? Mm-hmm. If you lick it, it tastes exactly like the way the pork broth did. They burnt the pork bones in that broth. I don't know how they did it, but they managed to do it. And so my first impression was literally, this tastes burnt. Definitely handmade, but it tastes burnt, and that did not give me a good impression, especially for a tonkatsu ramen.
Yeah, so...
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, you please finish your sentence. I'm sorry I interrupted.
I was like, I don't know if you tasted this or if it was just me, but it definitely tasted burnt.
Honestly, I didn't taste it after I added in all that raw garlic. Once I threw in that garlic, to me, I was just like, okay, this is what I'm used to. It's mostly what I could taste was garlic, so I didn't really taste the burntness that you had.
So I think overall flavor was just okay. It wasn't the greatest. It's definitely not what you expect from, a more, I would say, upper ramen place where they like, oh, we cared about quality and, we cared about the most authentic ramen, and then they kind of just butcher it for every single item that they've had. especially in my opinion with the tonkatsu and shoyu, like it really did not leave a positive impression other than it was made in house. What about you?
Yeah, I agree, but I think this is a little bit of a bias coming out because we've both been to Japan and had ramen from Japan, the source. So I feel like there's might be a little bit of a bias from us just because we've had, authentic ramen. So I think that also kind of skews our views of American ramen.
Indeed. But it is what it is, unfortunately. And so,
Yeah.
with that conclusion, we'll move on to the quality. What do you say would be the quality of this entire, meal?
For me, honestly, quality, I do appreciate them, trying to make everything, in-house. Not a lot of, frozen, like frozen chicken or whatever, and they just fry it up. I do appreciate that they try to do, most of the stuff in-house. But quality, I think could use some work.
I
What about you?
agree too. I appreciate the fact that, you can definitely tell it is in house, but when you eat it and, the whole experience of eating it and tasting it, I would say out of 5 stars, it would be a 3. Just because some of the expectations that I had for a ramen were thrown off completely, like I said, with the whole tonkatsu broth being, burnt tasting, um, and the shoyu being too salty. It can lead to mistakes, and I understand that. So if I had to be really generous, I would say around a 3.5 instead of a 3. In consideration the fact that they actually do seem to make things in house than just simply have frozen packages on the standby.
Yeah, for me, I would give the quality like a good solid 3 at most, just for my taste.
And so,
Yeah, I was gonna say I could see where you would give them a 3.5, but for me, I would just give it a solid even 3.
yeah. And so that pretty much wraps up our review for this place.
Actually,
Overall, oh,
if sorry, if you don't mind, I'd like to do service, a little bit of service, if you don't mind.
no problem.
All right, so if it's the service, waitresses, very nice. I really like that. They know what they're doing. There is a couple things like if you go in like a bigger group, more than 2 people, let's say, more maybe like 6 people, you cannot be seated unless all 6 people are there. If there's a table open, you cannot just, they won't sit you. You have to have all 6. So that means if 3 parties of 2 come in, they're taking that whole table, and you just have to wait. So
Yep.
that was a little bit kind of annoying. It could be annoying. Let's say, someone's coming from work and they're not going to be there right away, but everyone else is there. Too bad they won't sit you. You need to have your full party.
And
And
then
also, oh yeah, you had a comment for that?
yeah, and then like it could be understandable from that perspective of the business saying they just don't want to waste that much space. Um, they want a full party in order to get things going, but it really is just a more of a choice than anything. You may not like it. Some people may just be okay with it. Overall, it's just it is what it is.
Yes, I do agree. It is what it is, but I do have one instance. I went out to this ramen place with my work, and there were about 10 of us. 8 of us were in the restaurant, and we told them we had 10 people, and they're like, "Okay, you need, you need your full party." We're like, "Yeah." They're literally walking from the parking lot into the building. They're gonna be here in like 30 seconds at most. They still gave away our table away.
Oof.
So, yeah, so a lot of us just left because we couldn't sit at the table. We were literally 30 seconds from getting a table. 2 other people walked in and they got seated because, their full party was there. I was just a little bit like, okay, I guess, but we could see them from the door. They're like on the first row of the parking lot, walking up to the door, and we still didn't get the full 10 people in. So I'd say that part's a little bit. I don't want to say unfair, but it's just like we were so close, kind of thing.
It was frustrating.
Yeah. Also, I don't know what it is, but with their drinks, I ordered just a regular water, and when I wanted a refill, I asked for water, and they honestly forgot. They came back, they're like, "What did you get again?" I'm like, "Oh, I got water." And they're like, "Oh, okay." And I was like, "How do you forget water?"
It seems like it just really is dependent on the people who are the servers who happen to be there that day. So, yeah, I can see why it could be a little bit iffy going to that place in retrospect of the service.
Yeah, other than those two, like very minor things. Other than that, I'd say the surface was great.
And so, moving on from this ramen place, oh, I guess I should wrap it up by saying overall, I believe both of us say, you can try it, but I don't think you'll be impressed by it necessarily.
Unless you've never had ramen before, then you might think it's amazing.
Yes. So that is our conclusion for that store, that establishment. And so we'll move
We
on to the.
actually,
Oh, go ahead.
actually, last we still have to rank it on out of 5 stars.
True, we do. So should we just do overall for now?
Yeah, let's just do one rank overall. What we think of this place.
So what would your rank be?
Honestly, I'd give it at most a 3.
For me, I would give it at most a 3.5, and that's just me being generous. I would like to give it a 3 in terms of based on my first impressions, but I'm being a little bit generous just because it's kind of refreshing to see, in-house quality. So 3.5 would be my generous rating.
Yeah, and the solid 3 rating from me is because I have been back a couple times. I have tried different items, and I still see the inconsistencies through it's like the same ones over and over, so that's why I'm giving it a 3 and not a 3.5.
So that concludes, as I said before, that concludes our talk about this establishment and what we think about it. And so we'll move on to the next topic. This may be really short just because we're running on a very long episode, but that is fine. Um, and so we'll probably talk. Actually, I'm gonna make a slight change here. So usually how this works is me and Saki usually talk beforehand, really quickly saying, hey, what do we want to talk about this week? What should we decide on, just to have some, basis to work on for our episode. We don't transcript everything. That's kind of ridiculous and too much of a work. We just have a broad general sense of what we should talk about. And so we were going to talk about a subject that is plant-based food in replacing, meat products. However, because from what I'm seeing here, and unfortunately it is the way it is, right now we don't have that much time just because we're getting closer to what I would consider the maximum amount of time for an episode. So, the slight change here is that instead of talking about plant-based food here, we'll just probably end the episode here for now. And instead, what I'll do is for the next episodes, we may forego talking about popular franchises. We may cut the popular franchise shorter, and we'll add the plant-based foods segment to the next time we do a meal for two. So I'm sorry that if you were looking towards our secondary subjects that we usually do two different subjects at once for meal for two. If you were looking forward towards it, I'm sorry, but it is the way it is. So we'll just have to end it here. Would you like to end today's episode, Saki?
Of course. All right. I'm Saki.
And I'm Jin.
And this has been The Casuals, and we will see you all next week.
Bye-bye.